you know, Xamarin Forms, the name is already Forms, it's kind of boring, only for forms. And if you look at like what they put in this graphic, not even like what they're putting in the bullets here, but if you look at like the graphics right there, like Xamarin Forms is best for, and then you can see, you can't even see it, a couple of whitish boxes, gray, and then, ooh, a blue box, yay. So, you know, it's like Forms data entry applications, it's not really that exciting. So we didn't really sell it as exciting as well. The other day I did a virtual event, and it was good that it was virtual because I was going to punch him. No, I'm not a violent person. I was going to do something else. So there was a session before me, and he said, he's a friend of mine, so I can joke about this. So he said, like, Xamarin Forms was only even designed for creating prototypes. Well, I don't know if that's true. I hope not. But you know, we sold it this way as well. Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android is kind of like the underlying layer, which makes it all possible, right? So that's kind of like the only thing that does is make it possible to create 100% native applications, but based on C# and .NET. So you still get the native APIs, the native performance, everything, but now you get to write it in C# and .NET. So we have all that, and then suddenly you can do a media player, and you can do games, and you can do things with maps. But with Xamarin Forms, people also started to do more things. You could definitely do that. It wasn't always easy. It was sometimes a little bit frustrating, I'll be honest, but you could definitely do all those things, and people did. So over the course of 8 years, people started to create amazing applications. I should actually include samples. I'm just making presentations up while I'm standing here, but I should actually include samples with slides to show you, to convince you. But people were doing more, but kind of like the core, fundamental, the architecture of Xamarin Forms applications, or how Xamarin Forms was architected, wasn't really prepared to do all that. So the performance was kind of lacking, it wasn't really great, the experience was going a little bit backwards, trying to create your own custom stuff. You could do it, but it was a very painful process. So we needed to fix that, and in order to do that, we now had the unique opportunity to move into the .NET platform itself, and we are calling it now .NET MAUI, which stands for Multi-Platform App UI. And we made the P lowercase because else .NET MAUI, it just doesn't really have the same ring to it. So it's powerful, right? And I always have the tendency to do a little Lee Towers, you know? More experienced people know what's up. The other people can look it up on TikTok, no worries. And that's kind of now our cross-platform apps based on C# and .NET, but now for iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS. So you can see we swapped out UWP for Windows because UWP is dead also. 1 minute of silence, thank you. And now we're calling it Windows so that we don't fall into the same trap. We're not going to name it WinUI because actually it's WinUI, but who knows what might happen to WinUI. So we're just calling it Windows and macOS. So you can see that we now also have the desktop platforms that are first-class citizens as well, which is kind of easy because macOS comes kind of free because iOS already has this nice solution to bring your iOS applications to macOS as well. So if we pour a little marketing sauce over that, then we get .NET MAUI is the most productive way to develop native apps that perform great on any, well, Scott Hunter is going to tell you all of this probably in the keynote later. So how does it work? Under the hood, for the little bit more technical people, I'm assuming that we are that all here. So we have this, right? We have a couple of platforms, and you probably want to run on one or more of these, or well, 2 or more of these, I would say. If you're just going to run on one, you can still use .NET MAUI if that's what you really like, but it doesn't really give you the advantages, right? So you want to roll it out on 2 platforms or more. That's where the real benefit of .NET MAUI comes in. And you have that app code, you have that $1 million idea, the idea that's finally going to get you rich, that you don't have to attend these boring conferences anymore, and you can just go to Maui and sip on cocktails. So you have that, and that's where you want to be most productive, right? That's where you want to write all your code. But how are we going to get there? So first we have all these platforms. Android is putting out an SDK, iOS is doing that for macOS and iOS, so Apple is putting out the SDK. And we have the one for Windows, right? That's easy because that's C#, .NET, we have that. But in between, there is a whole lot of layers. Now I'm going to show you this one so that you know how hard our job is and you don't have to ever worry about it after again, so that's cool. First we have the .NET runtime. And that's now, as of .NET 6, that's really cool. We incorporated the Mono runtime and the .NET runtime that has been developed by Microsoft for ages. We've bundled that into one. And whenever you're running on non-Windows platforms, basically, then you're still running on Mono. doesn't really care. Mono, for the people who don't know, is the open source implementation of the .NET framework. Has existed for like 20 years or something. It's crazy. And this is still the core of what this cross-platform stuff runs on. So it doesn't really matter, because on top of that, we have the .NET Base Class Library, which is a thing that has existed since the beginning of the .NET framework as well. And since .NET 6, we've unified that. So if you're running on iOS, Android, Windows, doesn't really matter. You're going through that same BCL, and that figures out, like, where do I need to run? Well, that isn't the actual thing, but it's going to figure out itself where it needs to run on the runtime. Then on top of that, we still have the Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android, but now we've remarketed it because the Xamarin name is going away. And now it's called .NET for Android, .NET for iOS, and WinUI. So that's kind of like the framework for Windows that's now up and coming as well, which makes it really interesting to develop, because that's a framework that's still being developed as well. We are as well, so we're kind of like stuck waiting for each other all the time, which is really fun. But you're not here to you're not here to listen to my frustrations about that. And on top of that, we have .NET MAUI. So we're taking that little abstraction layer on top of that to make that basically all go away, so that the only thing that you can focus on is really your app code, your business logic, and you need to know how to work with .NET MAUI, and then you're good to go. So because of all that history with Xamarin Forms, 7-8 years, we already have like 40+ controls that we could relatively easily convert to this whole new architecture, which we now have because we've taken all the learnings from Xamarin Forms to not do that again. So we have this great performance, great new controls. That's kind of like the funny thing. Like, a lot of people now come look at this, like maybe some of you who don't know about Xamarin and Xamarin Forms. A lot of people at least knew it, but we noticed that there's a lot of people also coming in who see this for the first time, and we have now the amazing opportunity to amaze them and say, like, hey, we got all of this already. And they're like really excited, so that's cool. We already have 40+ controls, all kinds of things for navigation. And I'm going to skip over this a little bit faster so that we get to the Blazor part. So this is kind of important also for the Blazor part. We now have a single project system where you can run for all the platforms from one project. So before, if you would have this Xamarin Forms project, then this should look familiar, right? At the very top, we have the solution. No, take that. It's no problem. No worries. At the very top, you have the solution. And then under that, you have like the 3 projects, right? So we have My App, which is your shared project. That's where you want to have all your code, because whatever you put there, you can share across all the platforms. And then we have this Android and iOS. And if you would support Windows, we would have Windows. And if you support Tizen, which runs on fridges and watches and TVs from Samsung, we would have a Tizen project as well, which makes sense, right? You still, at the end of the day, we still need to deliver an IPA or an AAB or whatever. They're not, Google and Apple are not going to say, yeah, send us an exe, we'll make sure it works. We're not friends. We're not enemies, we're not friends either. So we still need kind of like separate projects to have all the metadata, all the resources, all the icons for the separate projects, for the separate platforms. Now we smash that together in one project. So you just have this. And all the separate projects are now in the platforms folder. So in the platforms folder, we'll see that in a little bit, you have like Android, iOS, Windows. We have a couple of more where you can provide all the metadata for those apps, because we still need to build the binaries for those platforms. But you could do it now more easily. Anything in the platforms folder, you can still write platform-specific code for that. So whenever you go there, you can still see iOS namespaces and whatnot, which is really cool, really powerful. You can still write platform code very easily, make that accessible to your shared layer. But everything outside of that is shared, including your resources, and that includes your fonts and your images, which is really cool, because if you've built a mobile application before, then you know the resources are a pain in the butt. Neck, I should say neck, that's better. Because you have to provide images for each resolution, each scaling, and for iOS it's kind of like overseeable, but for Android you have to do a gazillion resolutions. It's crazy because there are so many devices and they don't even know what's out there. So you have to provide all these images in the different resolutions. You don't need to do that anymore. You can just put in that SVG, preferably, because we can scale that and put that in the, we put that in the right places for you. Then in the run menu, you can just select iPhone, your Android emulator, your Windows machine, and it knows which bits to compile together, and it will start running from there. You do have to worry if your name is not David and there's David's iPhone in there. That might be something. So let me quickly give you a little demo of that, which is going to be like a file new .NET MAUI application, just so you have a sense of what's going on here. To use all this, You're going to use Visual Studio Preview for now, which is also a fun thing, because .NET MAUI went GA a couple of weeks ago, but the tooling for .NET MAUI is still in preview. And we don't want preview bits in a stable Visual Studio, but you do need the tooling to use .NET MAUI, but .NET MAUI is GA. Anyway, you get the picture. You still need Visual Studio Preview to actually use .NET MAUI today. I think in August, again, I hope this is not recorded because I'm not supposed to comment on that. I think in August we're going to release a version that should have everything in stable and everything should be cool. So when you go search then, actually I have it here pinned on the left side. We have a .NET MAUI app, we have a .NET MAUI Blazor app. We're going to see that in a little bit. And you can just do next, you give it a little name, MAUI app 11, that's the one that's going to make me rich. You can select the framework, that's fine, create .NET 6, and then it's going to do a little thinking, and we end up with a .NET MAUI application. Oh, it gives me enough time to look cool. Awesome. So here we are. And here you can see that single platform approach, or single project approach, sorry. So here we see that platforms folder, it has a couple of more. And whenever we go in there, we have this iOS with an app delegate, the info plist, which holds all the metadata for your application. So you can have all this stuff, right? You still have to have that in there. And actually, if we go into one of these, then you can see suddenly all kinds of scary iOS things, but you can still write it in C#, so that's really cool. And here we have like XAML, right? So this is like for every Microsoft product, we have this little piece of XAML. We have invented yet another dialect, so to confuse you a little bit more, that's what we like to do. So you can't copy and paste all that old stuff. But this is like, it looks very much like maybe if you've worked with HTML before or whatnot, you should be able to grasp kind of like the concept of these XAML things. Now, another thing that's really cool is this MAUI program. So this MAUI program, I'm going not to you today. Getting into cross-platform development is going to give you a lot of pain. You're going to wish you never did. So there's still enough to learn, right? You are definitely going to hit a point where you need to learn about the underlying platforms. That's not something that we can solve ever, I think. But we can make it easier, and we can at least make the threshold a lot easier. So that's where also the MAUI program, someone the other day asked me, like, why is it called MAUI program? It's called program in all the other .NET projects, things. I don't know. It just happens that way. I don't know, there's probably a good reason, but I have to figure it out. But this is like the generic host builder, right? So if you've worked with ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core before, then you at least know what this looks like, what this does. You recognize the structure, and you immediately know that you can configure things here. So that's what we're trying to do, lower that threshold to make it a little bit easier for you. Now, this is taking a long time. That's not something that I anticipated. For some reason, this is very slow. All right, so that's all. And what's cool is if you're coming from Xamarin Forms, so we have this builder.services, add transient and all that kind of stuff. So kind of like the dependency injection and all that stuff together. What you might know from ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core is in here as well. So you can do all that. Deploy started, well, finally. So I'm running this on Windows now. You should see a Windows application come up, a WinUI 3 application, which just has a little .NET bot. So what we saw here in the XAML, right, we structured that here. And for some reason, all the file new templates have this kind of click me button, which increment a value, because that's very exciting. That helps you get started. Oh my gosh, this is taking long. I only have 45 minutes, come on. What else? So, and also the code behind, right? So we have everything on board together with the XAML, data binding, all the things that you might know from other .NET projects. You will feel right at home. Maybe you've worked with WPF, UWP, all of that. I promise you, typically this works much, much faster. I don't know what's going on. Oh, there we are. Well. Okay, other rooms are plotted, but no worries. So you can click this button, and you have this little .NET bot, and you can do all this cool stuff. So this is just showing you the kind of like project structure that we have here. All right, let's close this one. Maybe having 3 Visual Studios open doesn't help as well. So don't worry about everything looking blown up. That's not a new feature in the new Visual Studio thing. That's just so that there are more experienced people in the back can see it as well. All right, so what's next? Yes, Blazor, thank you. So what is Blazor? Well, it's web development without JavaScript, basically. That's always the pun that we like to make, right? But so if you think about these single-page applications, these rich applications with all kinds of things, cool dialogues, cool data grids, the little left menu, the hamburger menu that disappears whenever you go there on a mobile device, then everything is responsive, everything looks still great, works great, you get all of that out of the box. But if you think of these types of applications, you also usually think of Angular or React or Vue, right? And those are all JavaScript based. Now, I can joke all day long about JavaScript, but in that time there will be a gazillion new JavaScript frameworks, so I'm not going to do that. So wouldn't it be cool if you could do all of that still in C# and .NET? Because regardless if you were switching from C# to JavaScript, switching context, switching languages, switching IDEs, whatever you want to do, is just hitting your productivity, right? That's not something that you should want. So we came with Blazor, and I say we because I'm at Microsoft and I can claim some of this smartness. And that's basically, you can write your single-page applications now with C# and .NET. And you can use the same familiar C# language. You can use the same tooling and IDE. Maybe you're working with Visual Studio. Maybe you're working with Visual Studio Code. You can still keep doing that. It has the consistent ecosystem. You don't have to download half of the internet with NPM packages. You can just keep using NuGet packages, which in turn will then download NPM. No, I'm kidding. And you will feed off that stability of, what did we just celebrate, 25 years of Visual Studio or something, 25 years of .NET, I don't know, something like that. So, you know, that doesn't make it stable, but it at least means something that it's been around for so long. So there's that. Now, where does that all fit in? On the left, we have kind of like the UI frameworks for ASP.NET. It's built on top of ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core. So we have MVC already. We have the Razor pages, which we can also leverage for Blazor. We have these single-page application templates right now, which actually use Angular, I think. And on the right side, we have kind of like all the things that don't really have UI, right? We have the REST API, SignalR, which is really cool as well, gRPC, all that kind of stuff. And it wouldn't surprise you that Blazor fits into that empty space that was there. So how does it work? We have kind of like two flavors, Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly. And with Blazor Server, you have still kind of like your traditional Blazor Server approach. So you have Blazor running on your server. And with that SignalR connection that I just mentioned, you're going to communicate with your application. Well, actually, it happens automatically. Don't worry about it. But what happens is that the user will go to that server, everything will get loaded, and then each change in the DOM, so your document object model, each click basically that's going to change the UI, is going to be communicated to the server and back. So, you know, it has its time and place, but it's maybe not ideal for all scenarios. The important thing here is Razor components. I'm going to say Razor components so many times that you'll get bored of it, but I don't care. So Razor WebAssembly is kind of like the other thing here where the whole Blazor component comes to the browser as well. So this is more close to how JavaScript does it. And here you can see the Razor component, see? And then you have suddenly WebAssembly on top of that. So WebAssembly is not something that we invented. That's something that you have in the browser. And whenever you can compile your language, that can be C#, it can be Rust or C++, or whenever you have your own language that you want to compile to there, you can compile that to something that the browser understands, and suddenly it runs locally, and your DOM will be influenced directly there. So this will have, you know, whenever you have choices, you have pros and cons. So I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I think the important bits are kind of like at the bottom. So for the Blazor server, you have this persistent connection, right? So you cannot really have offline applications because you have to have the server to get your UI changes. And you have higher UI latency because everything has to go back and forth. For Blazor WebAssembly, you have a larger download size because you're like any good .NET Core application, you have to download also the .NET runtime, right? For .NET 6, it's just 1 megabyte, so you know it's your regular cat GIF, but still you have to download that whole thing all the time, and it adds 1 megabyte to your application. And slower runtime performance, kind of like, you know, you don't know what machine is going to run it, what client is going to run it, so it can be a little bit slower because everything has to be processed there instead of on a powerful server somewhere in the cloud. All right, so we have Blazor server, Blazor WebAssembly, and now we also have Blazor Hybrid, and that's kind of like the main event. But not before I show you a little demo of the Blazor stuff as well, just for the people who aren't really aware. So let's take this second instance of Visual Studio, create a new project, and we also have like a Blazor template in here. So whenever we search for that, we have Blazor server, Blazor WebAssembly. You can fairly easily switch between them if you chose the wrong one afterwards, but just take this one. Blazor app 3 goes together with MAUI app 11, seems good. You can also choose like which framework, which has to be .NET 6, of course, authentication type, configure for HTTPS. Well, I would say so, we're not animals. And you can do some things with Docker, which I cannot really understand, so I'm not going to bother with Docker. So after we do this, we get a nice little Blazor project, and I will try to run that right away so we are not stuck waiting whenever I'm done talking. Here we get a little nice thing to get started. And whenever we look at the solution here, it's going to be, of course, very different from .NET MAUI, but we'll get there, we'll get there. So you can see data and pages and shared, and we again have this little program, not Blazor program, but just program. And it looks a little bit different because this uses some new C# 10 or whatnot features where you don't need to have the namespace and all that kind of things. But you can still see that builder, right? This has a builder as well. And we can say builder.server, and we have to configure Razor pages and server-side Blazor. And we can add this singleton, so we can use our dependency injection in here. So again, this is very recognizable whenever you're going to do this, or whenever you're going to do a .NET MAUI application, or maybe something else altogether. Let me actually run this so that that runs in the background. And whenever we do that, we have this app.razor, which is kind of like a router object. And here, this configures your whole Blazor application, right? So the app assembly says like, hey, the type of app, which is an object in this application, and it's going to read the assembly from that. So basically the assembly that we're running from. And that is going to scan all the routes. So if we look at the pages here, they each define a apenstaartje page. That's the @ sign for the person there. So we have this page, and this is a slash, right? So this is the index. Whenever nothing is specified, it goes here, and for other pages, it goes to other things. So that app.razor ties it all together, bootstraps our application, and that scans for these routes as well. And we have a /counter as well. So if Visual Studio ever becomes responsive again, I can go to the counter page, and you could see that we have in another page the counter there as well. So it registers all these things. Oh, come on. There we are. So /counter, see? And you can mix like HTML and CSS. That's like the beauty. You can do this add code right in here. And then you have the other apenstaartje for the current count, and you can just reference C# variables here, so that's pretty cool. So you can mix all that stuff like you were working in PHP again. That's really amazing. So we have this app.razor, and you can see the found and not found. So whenever a page, a route is then found, it goes to that found little thing, and it loads a default layout that it wraps around it. And whenever you're not found, that's basically your 404 scenario, you can show a little page. You can make this much more advanced if that's what you want, but this is kind of like your basic scenario. And whenever we run that, you can see already here in the background, we have this terminal window that comes up because we need to run this on a server, right? Even if we're going to do Blazor WebAssembly, there's still a server that has to hand out the file, so we need a server somewhere. And then a little browser comes up, and we have this thing. So we have this counter that I just had mentioned here, so you can see here at the top, right? If we go to /counter, then we actually end up in this counter page, and you can see the code with click me, no JavaScript involved. We can just do that. And again, an increment thing is something that belongs in new templates, I don't know. We have this fetch data, which kind of like fetch JSON data. And here in the home, we have this how is Blazor working for you? And that is a Blazor reusable component. Yes, thank you. I thought you would know that by now, but no, okay, that's fine. So here if we look at the index, we have the survey prompt, right? So this is a weird looking HTML tag. You don't really know that one. And if we go look here at our solution, we have in shared, we have this survey prompt. And this is just another little bit of HTML, right? And the component, the little tag, is just named after whatever you name survey prompt.razor, so it's just that name, very easy to remember. And you can make it very reusable, more reusable whenever you do this parameter on a regular C# property. And now you can suddenly set this title that we're using here, you can set that from like the outside, right? So we can suddenly set this. So that's pretty cool. That just works. And I'm going to show you that. Why I'm showing you that will become clear in a little bit. But yeah, now you know how that all ties together, basically. All right, so we've done that. I see I'm quickly running out of time, so I need to go. All right, so .NET MAUI and Blazor. I have this very cool PowerPoint animation that we're all going to have to watch here because it was a lot of work to put in there. It's the best of both worlds. So with .NET MAUI Blazor, you can build cross-platform native apps that run on Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android, and those are the same platforms as .NET MAUI. That is not a coincidence, people. And you can use what? Who would have thought? Your existing Razor class library. So that's really cool. So if you could take that survey prompt that we've just shown, you could take that outside of the project, put it in a separate DLL, and that DLL you can reuse between your different Blazor applications, but also now your .NET MAUI Blazor application as well. You could take that separate DLL, you can put it in a NuGet, and you can put it on NuGet.org, and now other people can use that survey prompt as well. And you can still install it on your .NET MAUI Blazor application. Now, I wouldn't do that with the survey prompt. Everyone gets that with the file new template, but you know, you get the idea. And you have full platform access. Now, that is a really important one. I'm going to talk a lot about that as well. I'll do that a little bit later. Excuse me. Blazor Hybrid is, if you want the extension of Blazor, so the third option to go with Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, built on top of .NET 6 and .NET MAUI. Sorry. And it's implemented through a Blazor web view control. Now, that's really cool. It's built as just another UI element. So you can take your Blazor web view and you can make that your whole application. Is my hair good? Okay. You can make that your whole application, or you can just make it one element inside of your UI. So you can also think about start transitioning your legacy applications, because the Blazor web view is not only available in .NET MAUI. It is also available in WinForms. Yes, WinForms is back. You can still use that in .NET 6. And you can use it with WPF. So if you have this, you know, you go to these conferences, you see these hip guys from Microsoft, I hope, with their funny shirts on, talking about the newest stuff, but then you go back to the office and then you have to work on that legacy WPF or WinForms application, right? So how cool would it be if we had some kind of scenario to modernize those legacy applications without completely rewriting it? Because let's be honest, that's never going to happen. Now you can, because the only thing that you need to do is bring your WinForms application to .NET 6, you can then use the Blazor web view inside of that, and suddenly you can start loading your Blazor components, right? So you can start modernizing. Maybe you're building a Blazor application next to it, and you can start using those components between those two projects, and that's really cool. That opens up a lot of new paths. Now, here we have this Blazor web view in action. So this is just another XAML element, right? Main page.xaml, Blazor web view points to a little host page in HTML to show you where it's going to be loaded. The little selector is going to tell you the HTML selector where the application is going to be loaded in, and then it's going to tell you the component type, which points to our main.razor, which is again the router component, the router object with the whole assembly scanning and whatnot that is in Razor. So this is kind of like your bridge between .NET MAUI and Blazor. So let's do a little Mythbusters here. Blazor hybrid apps run 100% natively in one process. So the server process that you just saw spin up on my machine, that doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. It doesn't need to, because Blazor is already .NET, and we have the .NET runtime running on iOS, Android, macOS, all those things. So you can just take that code and it will run 100% natively on there. We don't need to spin up some kind of server process, fake all kinds of things to make our Blazor application running there. You don't need to do that. You can just run it 100% natively. So there's no HTTP request. There was a question here in the front earlier before I started with like, can I bring my WASM, so the WebAssembly application to .NET MAUI Blazor? Yes, you absolutely can, but it doesn't really run on WebAssembly. We can skip that overhead. We can just run on .NET itself directly. That means you can also create offline applications. There are no HTTP requests necessary, so it doesn't run like a Blazor server or whatnot. Sure, if you want to get data from your REST API, your backend, then you still need to do calls and all that kind of stuff, but it's not required if you don't want to. And kind of like the only thing that is still rendered as web is the UI. So that's really cool. If you have web skills and you want to get into more cross-platform development and really get that icon in the store, or your management wants that, then that's something that you can totally do. You can leverage all those web skills that you already have, and you get a lot of stuff for free. All the responsiveness from a bootstrap or whatnot, you will get that for free. Whenever your device rotates, you will automatically see all that responsiveness. You don't need to do anything special for that. So that's really, really cool. Did I mention, where was that? Oh, no browser sandbox. Yeah, I skipped the most important part. No browser sandbox. So if you run Blazor inside of your browser, then you have the browser sandbox, luckily. You don't want the application to suddenly format your hard drive, right? But with .NET MAUI, you can definitely format your hard drive. No, but you don't have that browser sandbox, right? So what I want to say with that is in the browser you're restricted, luckily for us as consumers, but it runs as a web application, so you can't really access the file system if that's what you want. But if you're suddenly running a desktop application, then accessing the file system might be exactly what you want. So we don't have a browser sandbox. Again, it runs as a .NET application, so you can do everything that you would do with a native application, a native Java, Android application, a native .NET MAUI application. You can leverage all that power as well. So it's really the best of both worlds. Now, let's have a little demo of that. Actually, I'm just going to show this one. I'm not going to do file new. I'm not going to do file new. So imagine I did file new, and you're going to see only this project right here, the Brick Tracker MAUI client. And what you can see here is that we kind of like took the template for a Blazor application and the template for a .NET MAUI application, and we smashed those together, and now we have a .NET MAUI Blazor application. Because you can see we have that platforms folder, right? So we can specify, we can write platform-specific code, but we also have the pages folder. So we also have Razor pages in here, right? So we have the mix of both. We literally, I think literally these two templates were smashed together. That's how I like to think of it. But what you can see is like we still start with our main page.xaml, and we have the Blazor web view here. And you can see this is exactly the same that I showed you in the slide, right? So this is like the connection to our Blazor world, and here it's going to look at that main. So we have that here, main.razor, and basically from here you don't have to touch .NET MAUI or the platform APIs or whatever you want. You don't have to touch them if you don't want to. You can just go to here, and you will see that this is literally the exact same things as you saw in the Blazor application. So, well, if this was a file new application, sorry, this is already something that I've built, but you would see like the exact same things. You would have that counter and the fetch weather data and whatnot. You can see them actually here. They're still not used in this application anymore, but you would have all those things. And what is really cool as well, we still have our MAUI program with our builder, and we've registered some dependencies in here, and you can just use those dependencies as if you were doing that in Blazor. So the way to do that is just say apenstaartje inject, and you're going to get that service that you registered in your dependency injection container, right? So we can just get that the same way. We can mix all those things. That is what is really cool about all of this. All right, so let me see. So actually, let me tell you the backstory for this application. So I'm not really a Lego fan. Any AFOLs? AFOLs? No? No? No one? There's always one. All right, anyway. Oh, there. Oh, sorry. I didn't. Oh, yeah, of course. Michiel, yeah. So I'm not really a big fan myself, but you know, I have two young kids, and they're boys, so they're starting to go into like the Lego stuff. And we're also going through some renovation of our house, so we need to pick up all that Lego, which is apparently a lot already. We need to put it in boxes, and we need to move it a little bit. So I thought, I'm a developer, I can create a solution for that, and this whole world opens up to me. There are websites that allow you to find all the Lego sets, how many parts they are, how many colors, how they taste, I don't know. They save all that information, and then you can access that. You can even just get one brick, basically. I just ordered one brick because it was missing. I ordered one. You can just do that. 12 cents. Woohoo! Shipping costs were like €3 or something. But, you know, economy is broken. No, not at all. So, you know, we have all this stuff. So I decided, like, hey, we're going to write something for this. Now, I did it in a couple of ways. You can still set the startup project here. So I did it in, like, my server application. And this is just a Blazor server project. So I have it here. You can see it, Brickside server. This is, like, you can see, this is pages shared, nothing fancy. This is all the stuff that you've just seen. This is going to spawn up a little server process. It's going to show me in the browser. And then I have my Blazor application. Now, what's really cool, if we look at, let me just close all of these for a little bit. And if we go to our Solution Explorer and to the pages and to our index, we have right here this collection summary. So you can see this is, again, this little weird HTML kind of syntax highlighting thing. We have this collection summary, and if we go look a little bit further, I have this other project. Oh, no. Visual Studio stuck. It's happened each time a camera comes close. I don't know. So I have to do look like I'm doing really interesting things right here. So this collection summary right now, this is like your reusable Razor component. So we have this in a separate project, and I can just reuse this across these different projects. So and what is really cool, if you look a little bit more closely, you have this sets property right here. So I should be able to actually go here now, go to declaration, and you can see this sets property it actually takes in like a complex object as well. So it's not just strings or whatnot. You can just put your complex object in a variable in here. So that makes it really powerful and easy to work with as well, basically. So here we have the brick summary with all the stuff that we get together with that. You can even specify like its own background, PNG, a little bit of JavaScript. You can still use JavaScript if you really like Paint. You can provide your own CSS and that stuff. But here we have this collection summary, and this is going to show us, a little loading thing whenever the sets is null, so whenever that property is null, and else we're going to see a little table, right, with all the data. And here you can see my very, very sophisticated algorithm for actually processing all this stuff. So we have all that, and this is in a separate component. So let's see, actually, I think I talked long enough. You can see the exact same kind of like template, but now with a fancy logo up there, the brick tracker. And I downloaded a couple of CSVs from the site that I just mentioned. I think it's called brick tracker, I don't know, Michiel knows. And you can choose this file. So this is how a browser works, right? We cannot access the files without actually explicitly clicking a button, going here to this Harry Potter CSV, clicking that, and it's actually showing me this little table right here. So I can click Analyze, and my super fancy AI system will start working, and you can see it has 10,000 pieces, and I need 2 boxes to move this all. So this is really cool. One application done, boom. My children are way too young for Harry Potter, but that doesn't ruin the story. So I make this application again, and now what I did is I created it in a MAUI client. Now, for time, I'm going to only run this on Windows, but if I were to do this, if I were smart enough to start the Android emulator right before this talk, then it would have gone faster. But you would see the exact same application, but now with a different form factor, right? And you would automatically get that responsiveness, and it would actually run the exact same, but now the HTML would show up nicely for however it should look on this mobile device. But here for Windows, we're going to run it with this. And if I look at the index.razor for this thing, so again, to this question that I got here in the front earlier, like, would you reuse your complete Blazor application? No, I would not. I already think that we're taking up a challenge with combining the mobile platforms and the desktop platforms. I already think that's worlds apart, but you can make that work together from one code base. But I think adding a web target is, I don't see that happening. There is frameworks that do that. Good for them, but I have yet to see a good-looking sample that runs great on all these platforms. Maybe I'm wrong, come to me, please do, but I don't see that happening. So what I see more is that you would have this tiny little bit of code duplication by bootstrapping your Blazor application also inside of that .NET MAUI application, but the rest, where it makes sense, create those Razor class libraries and reuse those across the different projects. That is where I see the actual gain here. So this is the index.razor for our .NET MAUI application, our .NET MAUI Blazor application, and you can see that same collection summary is coming back here, right? But we also have a couple of statements here, and this is already where the mobile and desktop worlds diverge as well. So we have this if show file picker boolean right here, and if we're going to show the file picker, we are going to actually show this little button. And you can again see here this add sign on click, so here we bridge into the Blazor C# world, and this allows you to reference a C# method that's all the way down here. And what we're going to do, which is really cool, is just say filepicker.pickasync, and we're going to bring up the native Android, iOS, whatever is implemented on that platform, file picker, and it's going to show that. So this is transcending the Blazor world, and this is reaching out into the platform, into the sensors, into the APIs that are available on the platform, in this case with Xamarin Essentials or .NET MAUI Essentials. We have a lot of APIs to access like cameras, location data, whatnot, all that stuff. Also something to pick files, and you can just do that from here. You can mix this all, and that's what makes this really powerful. But if we're running on Windows, so if we look at what this show file picker is made up of, you can see is Android, is iOS, is macOS. We're now running on Windows, so we're not going to see that button. But now what happens? How am I going to get my collections? Well, like I said, this is kind of like basically you see the same application, but now we don't have a button. Because what we can now do is we can access the file system directly. So I can go here, open this on my file system somewhere, somehow, and I can copy these CSVs. Let's be a little bit adventurous and take them both, Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. I'm going to go to my downloads folder and hope there's nothing embarrassing. And if I paste them in here, you can see that my application automatically picks up on that, because now we can use the file system watchers. And the file system watchers are an API that you can just point at a folder and you can say, hey, I want you to look for any changes in files whenever something gets added or deleted or changed. And you can execute logic whenever one of these events happen. So you can see now with our .NET MAUI Blazor application, we can just implement those file watchers, and it will do that stuff for us automatically. So we can just access that file system. And if I delete them, then they're going away again. See, I'm not lying. This is not timed. Whew, right on time. Okay. So that's all that you can do. Now I have this other amazing, but I'm out of time, so you should complain to the future tech people and say the session should be longer. But I also have this cool demo that I'm not going to show you right now with WinForms, where you can just load that Blazor web view, and I just searched with Bing for like free Blazor components. The Rats and Blazor components came up, and I just load that in a little WinForms application. So that is really cool stuff as well. I even cannot find my stop button anymore. Oh, here we are. Nope, it's not. Okay, just going to move on. Move on. All right, so let's just wrap this up a little bit. There's another very cool demo, which is called .NET Podcasts. If you just go not .NET like this, but written out, .NET podcast.com, you will go to this very cool showcase, which is really functional. It has podcast episodes. You can click on that, and what's really cool is that the actual web application is Blazor, and then they build the mobile application basically twice, once in .NET MAUI native, so with all the components as in .NET MAUI that are available there, but also once with a Blazor web view. So the same .NET MAUI application, but now with everything in Blazor and components shared between the web application and the mobile application. And then with Signal R, you can listen together, so you can start a podcast, you can invite someone with a room code, and you can listen together in sync to the podcast. It also has the whole server thing for this. You can host it on Azure. Don't forget to turn it down whenever you're done, because else it will eat up your credits. Ask me how I know. So that's really cool for you to check out at home. Now, I can see you're like, yes, this is amazing. I want to jump up and get out of here and get my coffee. But hold on. There's still much else. I know I'm running out of time, but before I let you explore on your own, I get a lot of questions. And you can see here where kind of like the marketing slides stop, and I have to design my own slides. I get a lot of questions like, when should I use .NET MAUI Blazor? Or should I use .NET MAUI Blazor? And maybe should I use .NET MAUI? Or when should I do that? There are so many options right now. Or when should I use just Blazor? And kind of like the answer to that, there's an X here on, I need to stand here. It's kind of like, it depends. It depends. Extra dramatic effect. But this is kind of like, it really depends. I think this is just, there's many options, many choices. And we have all these paths now. If you're a web developer and you want to leverage all those skills, but go into cross-platform and learn a little bit more about C# and .NET and leverage all the power, the more performance, then this is the right path for you. If you have this existing Blazor application and you want to cross-platform and reuse your stuff, this is a way to do that. That legacy application that you mentioned, or maybe you just have too much time and you like to tinker with new stuff, then just because you can. So where does that bring us? If you want to have the most reach, like even your fridge has a browser these days, then you can access your Blazor application. So if you're really going for reach, then go with your Blazor application or maybe your progressive web app. If you want to be a little bit hybrid, get a little bit in the middle, a little bit more power, then maybe Blazor plus hybrid, and you're in the same ballpark as Electron, although we have better performance than Electron, just saying. And you can do that native app loaded in a web view. Or if you want all the power, then you probably want to look at frameworks like MAUI, WinUI, WinForms, WPF, and you really have all the power that you get to running on this platform. So thank you so much all for joining. I hope this was informative or a little bit at least entertainment. And special thanks to this gentleman here in the front for lending me his dongle so that you can actually look at something. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.